welcome. This is a video on salt, which I decided to make after researching salt because I found out that even though I thought I was eating healthy, I was eating way too much salt, and it's just there's so many reasons it's bad, and we don't know as much about it as we really should. So I figured I'd share some of my research with you. So our bodies require 300 to 500 milligrams of sodium, which is, of course, what we're interested in salt in terms of what it does to our bodies. It's what nutritionists look for. The amount that we're supposed to eat daily has been capped off by the USDA at 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And the American Heart Association went even further than that and said 1,500 milligrams is the most sodium we should have in a day. But the average American eats about 3,400 milligrams. So we're way over, and that might not even be a proper representation because that's everyone 2 years or older of age. So it's probably more like 4,000 milligrams of sodium for like an adult male. Anyway, so this is intimately linked with our blood pressure, as we know, which of course is directly linked to heart disease and stroke, which are two of our top 5 killers. Heart disease is our #1 killer in the US. So this heavily refined white powder, that we eat every day also turns out to be very addicting, which I'll get into a little bit later. And so we think of table salt as the main source of salt, but that actually only adds up to about 6% of our total salt. So that's completely misleading. In fact, bread is up around 7%. So you start to see it's just hidden in all these foods. For example, packaged foods actually make up 80% of our total sodium intake. So that's just like, it's just everywhere trying to get us. It's just hiding in the bread, hiding in every single package that you eat. Baked beans, a whole can probably has about 1,800 milligrams of salt, even if it's organic and healthy, etc. Alright, so before we started mining salt about 6,000 BC, salt was pretty rare. It was a currency. People used to trade with it, stuff like that. And, it became a big part of history. Like Gandhi's Salt March was a big example. And, through history, we started out with small salt producers. And, it was limited. But then it reached a point where we got salt refineries, heavy machineries, industrialization. And it just went crazy. And all of a sudden we started, processing it with centrifuges, heating it to 1,200 degrees, and just making it salt and only salt, no other minerals, and it's just like a giant torrent of salt that we eat as a nation. Anyway, so what does it actually do to the body? When you look at what sodium does, it actually holds water weight in the body, and this can be bad for a lot of reasons. The first reason is that it's actually excess water in our blood, and our kidneys try and filter out this excess water, but there's so much salt that's holding the water that your kidney can't actually perform the osmosis that it does in order to extract water from your blood and then later it turns into urine. So what does this do? It decreases the oxygen content of our blood, which is really bad. It increases our blood pressure. It just makes us hold extra weight. It causes things like cellulite, etc. And so it's just really not something that you want to be eating a lot of. And historically, we didn't really eat that much of it. So why are we addicted to salt then? Why can we be so addicted to salt? Basically, what happens is, since we are wired to eat a lot of salt because it was a scarce thing throughout evolution, basically we have certain pathways within our brain that make us want to eat more salt. So there's some studies done on this. One was by Professor Emeritus of the University of Melbourne named Derek Denton. He said, quote, "The hunger for salt is providing neural organization that subserves addiction to opiates and cocaine." Basically, it's saying that the stuff that's happening in our brain that makes us addicted to cocaine and opiates, which is like heroin and morphine, etc., is the same thing that happens when we eat really high salt foods, basically. And another doctor, PhD and MD, Wolfgang Liedtke, I think it's pronounced, at Duke University, said, while studying rats, he said, "We were surprised and gratified to see that blocking addiction-related pathways could powerfully interfere with sodium appetite." So basically, if you turn off these addicting pathways, we no longer want to eat as much sodium. And so that is one crazy little fact there. So it's basically one more thing that we're addicted to that Very dangerous, causes heart disease, obesity, kidney disease also, which is one of our top 10 killers as well. So this is very dangerous. I want to really quickly look at Finland and what they did to reduce their sodium intake, because they really did some kick-ass work. Basically, in the late 70s, they decided we're eating way too much sodium. They were eating about 4,800 milligrams per day, which is way higher. It's about, 1,400 milligrams higher than what we eat, which is insane. Anyway, so in 1978, they launched a salt reduction campaign, and they got some really good results. They measured it 30 years later in 2006, pretty much 30 years later, and found that their 1/3 reduction in sodium, which they achieved, got them a 75 to 80% decrease in incidence of death from heart disease and stroke, which are the two connected diseases to sodium intake. And so they were saying that the reason is because they did the campaign. And so, we have, I think it's 150,000 deaths a year that are correlated to sodium intake, if you want to call it that. And so reducing 75 to 80% of that in the U.S. would get us way down there, and it would be a huge step. And so now I want to look at the Yanomamo Indians in Brazil and Venezuela. They're actually studied as like a no salt culture. They don't add salt at all to their food, so they're pretty much back where we were before we started mining salt, before we started extracting salt and adding it to our food. So they didn't actually measure how much sodium they were eating, but they measured how much sodium they were peeing out. And it turned out they peed out about 30 milligrams a day on average of sodium. So that could be from, maybe they sweat some out, so maybe it doesn't all make it through. I actually, looking at their diet, I calculated that they probably got about 120 milligrams of salt, because they mainly ate plantains and cassava, which are two starchy vegetables. I think make up around 80% of their diet, maybe 70%. And that's about as much as one bite, like larger bite of a Big Mac. So that's 120 milligrams of sodium for their entire day. And just to give you a sense, peeing out 30 milligrams of sodium is extremely low. On WebMD, they say the normal range of sodium excretion in a 24-hour period is between 900 and 5,000 milligrams, which is just ridiculous, and that just shows what our American standards are. So the conclusion of all this is pretty much eat less salt and sodium in general, and the way to do that is really to eat more whole foods and less processed foods and less meat foods. For example, a whole cup of green beans has 6 milligrams of salt. A whole cup of rice is 10 milligrams. A whole cup of blackberries only has 1 milligram. And spinach, 24 milligrams. But if you look at salami, 1 cup has 2,400 milligrams, which is over the daily required, or daily upper limit of sodium intake. So, look at what you're eating, look at where the sodium's coming from, look at the back of the label, figure out how much of the actual package you're eating of something, and multiply the serving size by that, figure out how much salt you're actually getting, and you'll realize that when you start cutting it out, you feel a lot better, and hopefully, lose some weight. If you have some excess weight, that's water weight, and your skin, I've heard a lot of people say their skin clears up, etc. They don't have the red kind of blotchiness that you see from high salt intake. And so, whole foods, eat more plants. That's it. Thank you.